Hello, Jennifer. It's so good to see you and to get to learn a little bit more about the work that you're doing and your path into early education. So, thank you so much for joining us for this Excellence in Childcare podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Lynn. I really appreciate it.
So, we need to start first by learning more about your journey into early education and care because you have a rich story that maybe our audience doesn't know about. So, here's your opportunity to tell us more.
Awesome. So I kind of have a story where my journey into childcare, my journey out of childcare, and now my journey somewhat back into childcare, but at a different capacity. Been a lifelong entrepreneur since my early 20s. And there was a point I was in a business, in a real estate finance business, and we all know what happened in 2007 or 8. I was a single mom without any financial help. I provided financial help for my parents as well, and I lost it all. Everything, very scary time. So I said, you know what? Failure is not an option. I quickly pivoted. I formed a business with two business partners that we quickly grew to over 1,000 clients and about 30 staff. We had to expand the office like 3 or 4 times in a year. The growth was so rapid, but I knew that that was not going to last too long. And I said, you know what? The next business I have, I want it to be a necessity. And I figured, what's a necessity? Or the food industry or childcare? And I love kids. I didn't like the food industry. And I said, I'm going to buy a childcare center one day. And I did in 2012. I didn't know what a lesson plan was, but in a year, yeah, that's another funny story. But in a year, I learned everything about the business, and I made the center, it became very successful. A few years after that, they were selling a second center. I wanted to grow, I wanted to grow, I wanted to grow. I had been in bankruptcy as well. So I didn't have the money to pay for the second center at the price that they were selling it. And they sold, the new buyers ran the business down to the ground, but I happened to know the landlords and they reached out to me and they say, do you want it?
Wow.
Pretty
Incredible.
much, pretty much. I mean, I had to buy the center without any kids at the time, but within a year, that center was full. And of course, my itch for business and growth, I said, now I want a third center, but I want a standalone building. I didn't know how I was going to do it. Again, I still couldn't get a loan with SBA because of my bankruptcy. You have to wait about 4 years. And I saw this building. It was about $3.8 million at the time. And I went to go see it. And I said, there's no way, this is not worth this. They ended up putting the building in contract with a large company and with a franchise company, Childcare. I put a contract. I found out, I got together with the REIT, the real estate, um, what is it? Real estate trust fund. I forgot the words. The real estate investment trust fund.
Yep.
Yes. And, because the way the universe works, it just came to me and they're like, okay, go look for whatever building you want. I put a contract on another building that fell through. The building that I wanted fell through as well. The realtor tells me, why don't we go see this other school? And it happened to be that one center, the 3.8, big mama, like I call it. And this is about 2.5 years later when I first saw it. And we met. I was able to buy it with the REIT for about $2.6 million, and the building ended up being mine. Yeah.
What a success.
Yeah.
That's
So
amazing.
nothing is impossible, which is we're going to talk about that a little later,
Yeah.
and how I live my life. But the universe really worked for me. The centers worked great. But when I had my third center, I was going crazy. I didn't have systems. I didn't have processes. The enrollment was good. I was making money, but I was, wearing many hats, constantly running from one center to the other, filling in holes, answering the phone. All the directors calling me. I was just going crazy. And I said, something has to change. and I implemented a lot of systems. I implemented EOS in my business, which now is what I do full time for other businesses. And after COVID, I had my best year yet, and I was approached to sell my centers, and I did. I sold my centers to a private equity firm that retained all my staff, had very similar values, and so that's when I exited the business in a very successful exit. And my team is still together. They're still there. They're doing great. Or my old team, but now I'm doing EOS and I'm helping other entrepreneurs, and I have many clients that are actually in the childcare industry. So that's how I'm kind of back into the industry somewhat.
I'm not surprised. And just a compliment to you because you're living proof of resiliency. Don't let the um, what is in front of you stop you from dreaming and believing and investing and still trying to find a way that it can still be possible. And that's what I love about your story. You're an entrepreneur, you've got the grit, you gained the experience in early education, you exited, and now you're bringing all of those elements back to the industry. So for today's topic, we're actually going to be talking about our growing people, the whole concept of how do you nurture them, how do you grow them, and then hiring for skills versus hiring for culture. So there's a balance between those two things, and I'd love to hear more about your perspective on that.
Well, hiring for skills versus for culture. And in our industry, hiring has always been difficult. Staffing has been the most difficult piece to really perfect. And even before COVID, I would hire based on culture. I would not hire based on skill. I wasn't the best at hiring management staff for many years. That's when I was wearing multiple hats and, a lot of turnover, unfortunately, very stressed. But then I learned if it's not my wheelhouse, I need to, hire someone
Yes.
that this is what they do and they do it well, and it's not an expense. It was a true investment, and the return on investment that I received was amazing. So, but definitely I've always hired based on culture. You can have the person with a long resume that fits every skill needed, but they don't fit your culture. They arrive late. They don't like kids. They're always in a bad mood. They're toxic. I really don't look at skill set. I have hired my best directors based on culture, but also most importantly, since I'm not the expert in hiring, based on profile assessments. Will the
Yeah.
profile of this person, is their natural coding, DNA gonna be able to? Is this their wheelhouse? Is this where they're gonna be successful doing? And like not only doing but also loving the position.
Agreed. Because in my experience, and maybe you see this too, the distance between what you're naturally good at from a culture perspective versus what the job requirement expects, the bigger that gap, the greater the stress for everybody. So the more you can make sure that the culture is aligned, 100% agree that that's a great jumping off point.
Yes,
Um,
and I can give an example about
Ooh,
hiring for culture. So I hired this director. She had the perfect resume, everything. She fit the bill, everything was great. And one of my core values was demonstrate integrity. All decisions that we made had to be made with integrity. So I asked her this question. You have this child, has been bitten many times, family's upset, and now again the child is bitten, but this time you can't see the bite. Would you report it to the parent or not? Guess what the answer was?
what?
She said no.
What? Okay,
Right.
keep going.
I
Keep.
hired her anyway. She lasted 3 days. 3 days. And I made the mistake. I was still learning. I was still learning via my mistakes, but that's one with mistake that I will not make again.
And she probably knew it wasn't the right fit for her. I'm sure that was probably a mutual understanding as far as her exit, would you say, or no?
No, because she thought, she knew a lot. But then when she saw the way that we ran the business and how everything, was done and the way it was done, she realized that she couldn't handle it. So she left on her own, which was great.
Good. That those are the best exits, or more comfortable exits, but lesson learned, and then it's all part of the culture. So I fully appreciate that. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you grow your people. I know you've got a lot of expertise in this area. Let's just start with an open-ended question around that, and then I'll dig deeper into those
Okay.
areas of growth and opportunity.
Okay. So what's the question? Oh,
So
how I grow my people?
yeah, what are some of the hallmarks of success for growing your people?
Well, when growing my people first is desire, will, and culture.
Okay.
They must be part of the culture. They must demonstrate the desire, will, and I also use the profile assessments. There's many out there. There's culture index, there's predictive index, but I use one of them to see if they'll be able to do the job. And if they're willing and they want to do the job, it's a matter of having systems in place on how to coach people up. Onboarding checklists are essential to making sure that you provide the proper training, that you provide coaching, and that you also provide guidance and set goals, 3 goals a week or 3 goals a day, on a daily, but the perfect number for setting goals is three a day. What are you going to work on today? And there was this one director that I had that when I bought my third center, she had been a teacher for 16 years in that center. And she became a curriculum director, and then eventually she became an enrollment and then director. She did not like hiring or firing because she was very introvert.
Yes.
And one of the goals that we set was that she had to have 5 interviews in that week, with all the tools, all the questions, making sure the systems were in place. So the goals were set and it was just a matter of practice, but definitely lots of coaching, weekly meetings, setting weekly objectives, and then following up on the objectives. What get measures improves, what you expect, you got to inspect. And she's been one of my greatest success stories. She's also dyslexic. And she told me, I'm dyslexic. I'm like, okay, I'm glad you told me that. Thank you for being honest. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do the job. We just got to work around that. So, what are your weaknesses? What are your strengths? And based on your weaknesses, let's supply you with tools so you can work around that. And actually, the client that I visited yesterday was referred to me by her. And she's like, she called me, oh my God, you're the legend. Because I think in my county, I think I'm the only person in the last 30 years that have sold multiple centers at one time.
That's amazing. And you left such an impression that I'm sure she shared that with others. So in that situation, you say, well, I have a couple of questions around this. So when you talk about setting goals and the magic number is 3, as I'm hearing you say, so 3 per day or whatever the period of time is, do you recommend doing that with just leadership, or does that also apply to other parts of your staff?
However, you work with your direct staff, this is the way I would do it. I would expect them to do the same with their team.
Okay.
So
That
it's a
makes sense.
ripple effect.
Sure. And ideally, there's some connectivity or connectedness between the leadership, mid-level leadership, and then the staff as well, because you should all be working on some similar goals as part of the vision and the culture, as you already pointed out. So how do you keep track of all of that? I mean, the first thought I have, because I'm a goal setter, I'm a very much of a I need my checklist. I want to know what I'm working on. I want to know how I'm going to be measured. But how do you keep track of that in a busy setting, as we know with early education?
Well, systems is key. especially in our industry in early childhood education, because there's not much time to think, because there's just so much energy, so much movement, and so much interruptions in the center. So it's very important to have systems and processes in place. But it's just like when you're hiring and training a person into a new position that they've never ever done it before. How do you do it? Well, you have the job description very clear. You have your onboarding checklist. And what are you going to train them on day one? What are you going to train them on day two? How are you going to train them on day three? Or what you're going to train them on day three, day four, all the way to 90 days. And it's
Yes.
providing that training. But also, in the case of my director, we would have weekly director report meetings, and they
Hmm.
were all documented, and they followed a script, they followed a sequence, there was an agenda, and that's where the goals were set. And based on these goals, how can I support you? What help do you need from me? What tools can I provide you? And I would provide those tools. I would also challenge her against her what she wasn't comfortable doing, against her area of discomfort. I would challenge her. I said, okay, now you're going to do this X amount of times. And she became great at hiring, actually.
Right. I love that. So I don't know if you've ever seen this model, but when we first start out with a skill that's brand new to us, we're the conscious incompetent. We're very
Yes.
aware of what we don't know. And the goal then is to eventually become the unconscious competent, where you're unconsciously doing the things that make you excel and be good. But we never want to stop at, now I'm doing this with perfection. We want to continue to grow constantly. And I suspect you have a few thoughts about how to continue to grow and stretch ourselves and to measure ourselves. What are your thoughts around that?
What I'm always constantly evolving, and I expect that from my the people that I work with. Our world is moving way too fast. Is evolving technology wise extremely fast, and expectations. So I'm always evolving, I'm always learning, and I always require that from my team. But going back to building people up, many people, including we have the imposter syndrome. A lot
Oh,
of us do. And this director said, I don't think I can do the job. I said, many of us are not even aware of what we're capable of doing. So,
that's
you
right.
know what? Let's try it out. And if it doesn't work, we have this plan for you. But I don't want you to not give yourself the opportunity. And that's something that worked well with her and with many others as well in the company.
So not everybody knows what imposter syndrome is. So could you give your definition?
Imposter syndrome, how I understand it, is not good enough. I don't have the ability to. And all these voices in your head as to why you cannot do something or achieve something.
Right. And that's what stops us from even trying, or hiding, or fear of failure that goes into that. And that's a very stressful thing, but it's also a very real part of evolving. Like you said, you're always growing, you're always evolving, you're pushing yourself into new areas of expertise, new areas of knowledge. And that requires being vulnerable and say, yeah, I may not know the best way to do this, but I want to push myself into that area. And it sounds, as a leader, that that's one of your key strengths in growing people, is to get them to believe in themselves, even though they feel like I'm a bit of an imposter, but I can get over that.
Yes. And one story about her is that a teacher of hers in at a very young age told her that she was never going to be anything because I guess her dyslexia, and it really hurt her
Oh,
emotionally, and she carried that for years. And I also coached her through that, and that was the voices in her head, and she can do it. And I definitely would uplift my people, and it was part of our culture.
that's wonderful. I love that. So we've talked a bit about first culture. We've talked about the importance of systems and processes. talking about identifying our key strengths and where we might have some um, deficiencies, but they can be overcome. So just if we can start to wrap this piece of it up a little bit, back to measurement. And I know that you're a pro in EOS, and I hear this term, but not everybody knows what that is. So what is it and how is it used?
EOS is a human management system. It stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and it's a complete system with super simple tools that help you manage and operate all the moving parts of your business. And there's about 25 to 30 tools. They can be found on EOS Worldwide website. They're free for download. The book Traction explains the tools and how you can implement them. They can be self-implemented into the business or via an implementer. And it's just systems and processes on how and when to meet with your people, how many goals to set. And it clarifies, it helps you strengthen the 6 key components of your business, which is having a clear vision. Who are the people that I need to execute that vision? What are the seats that I need at my company to execute the vision? What are the roles? So it creates a lot of accountability and clarity of roles. Also, there's the data component, which is running your business on facts and figures with scorecards, with measurables, just numbers that you know you need to achieve on a weekly basis, and everybody in the company. Strengthening the issues component is getting really good at solving your issues as a leadership team, not by yourself and not when everything explodes, is solving issues on a weekly basis. And by solving issues on a weekly basis via the weekly meeting, you transfer from running your business in a reactive manner to a proactive manner. You're solving issues as they arise and as they're small before, rather than putting band-aids and it's always coming back and then there's an explosion, you got to run, solve this issue. And then you have another fire you need to put out. And it just removes that from the day to day. And then there's the processes component, getting all your processes documented at a high level, simple approach with a good system. And then strengthening the traction component, which is the meeting cadence, setting goals every 90 days, staying on track of your goals. It's a very powerful system. It changed my life. It made me fall in love with my business again. But not only did it do that for me, it really empowered my leadership team. They were the captains of their ships, how I would call it. I
That's
wouldn't go to the schools 4 months, and I'm very picky. My standards are extremely high to the point that the ceilings had to be vacuumed every 2 weeks.
I love it. I love it because and you raised something too, which I'm understanding from your systems and processes and your accountability to that very point about vacuuming the ceilings. Not everybody's going to recognize the value of doing that, right? But it's something that was important to you because that is a perception. That's part of your brand. That is what is recognized, that somebody who sees that you have that attention to details shows that you care about all things big and small. So like you said, what you care about gets better and is attended to, gets measured and gets better. So I love that example because I have clients who similarly have things like, I want the diapers changed exactly this way, but that's actually part of the culture and part of the expectations.
Yes. And I have to be honest with you, Lynn. One of the tools when I implemented EOS and I started bringing in all, the systems and processes, and one of the tools that we implemented was First Place, and the directors knew what they had to do every week. They had their weekly list, they had their week 1 list, their week 2, their week 3, their week 4. They had all the checklists because there's just so many moving parts. And if it's not in checklist, you don't have a document that just reminds you, something is going to be missed. So they had that. as far as their daily, their weekly, their monthly, the what had to be done every January. Even we would do inspect. We had a bonus program, so we would do also inspections via a checklist. So the checklist really made a difference. And then me, one of the reasons I didn't have to go to the centers is because I would look at, I had access to the system, so I knew what hadn't been done, and what, the checklist all had a date of when things had to be done, and I would see in the system if it was done or if it wasn't done. And usually most of the time it was like that in the centers, so I rarely visited the centers, and that's one of the tools that I used that was game changing for my team and for me to keep my sanity.
Right. Peace of mind.
Yes.
Uh, you made me think about something when you were talking about the systems and the processes and the measurements and the goals. And, you've got one place as a tool. Did you share that information? Like, I hear some leaders and owners who are hesitant to share data, like the actual data, like, here's how we're doing. It's not punitive. Like, let's say we're falling below 100%. That's not intended to be punitive. It's intended to say, here's our opportunity for growth. Did you share a lot of that data? Or let's talk about how you share and communicate
I
about.
was very transparent.
Okay.
I needed my team to know what the goals were so that they can help me achieve the goals. I was very transparent, not only with my leadership team, but with my entire organization. I would review on hiring. We would do it every 2 weeks. We would review the company vision with the new hires, and we would review, because it was 3 centers, we would do it via Zoom. We would review the accountability chart, and we would also explain to them, this is where the company is going. I needed to make sure that they wanted to be a part of that vision. But I felt that I had a leadership team. It wasn't only me. It was my team, and we would do things collectively. We would set goals collectively. It wasn't only me, hey, this is what I want to achieve, come and help me achieve it. No, it's like, what can we do? And if we wouldn't reach the goal, we would work together and like, okay, what's not working? How can we solve this? How can we work together? I have had, and they're still together, what I call the dream team. I really did.
Amazing too, because they have each other's back. And that was a big part of it, is that if there were goals to be met, how can I help you? Where are the places that I can fill in? So there's so much that we could dig deeper into with this,
Yeah.
but in only a 30-minute podcast, this has given us a flavor and a taste. I'd like to get your opinion, shifting gears slightly, and maybe it's related, but what are you seeing as some of the big challenges that early education and care is going to face over the next, let's say, 1, 3, 5 years? Are there some um, key areas that you think we need to be thinking about preparing for?
Absolutely. Liability. Liability accidents are increased. There's new staff that have entered into the industry, new into the industry. The staff that we had before that had been in the industry for 5, 10, 15 years and knew exactly what they had to do in a classroom, we don't have that anymore in our industry. Most of them have left. So we have to go back to the basics, hire based on culture, based on assessments. We got to dedicate the time to train them up. I have a client right now they're in a child care center, and they're having accidents left and right, and serious accidents. And
Mm,
I'm helping them, going in there with them, and we're retraining everybody, defining, making, using the onboarding checklist and starting from there, and with the job descriptions from the bottom up, and elevate and keeping them accountable and upholding the policies, providing tools, training, identifying where the training is needed, what tools are
yes.
needed, and providing and equipping. Once trained, once tools provided, once they're observed, coaching, and they still don't do it right, that's when you have to follow your management policies, first conversation, constructive advice memo, a write-up, because if things are being allowed, silence is acceptance. If you're not calling things out, you're accepting it. But it's not okay. So the new staff that we have, it's not their fault because they don't know.
That's
And
right.
many leaders, and I met with one of my clients yesterday, she was very frustrated. I'm like, but have you trained them? Have you provided them with the tools? It's, well, they're not the same as they used to. They don't care. Or this, that. Well, not necessarily. You got to do your part as a leader. So
Yes.
liability is huge. And I'm really emphasizing a lot on this because I think it's the biggest issue that our industry is facing in the next year. Huge. That's number one. Number two is the world is evolving very fast. We have these big companies that they're buying a lot of the centers, and you got to innovate. You got to be on your feet. You got to put making sure that your product that you're building looks well, that your product is well, the service you provide is good quality, your systems, even people that are um, applying for jobs, they want a seamless transaction. If you have a paperless and you have a paperless system and everything is electronic, it looks like you're legit,
Right.
and it impresses people and they want to be part of an organization such like that. So if you're on paper and doing attendance with, marking those lists with a innovate because look, AI is coming. AI is already here. So that onboarding, liability, making sure that a lot of time is dedicated to training up the people to avoid the liability, but also having a system in place where people are constantly being measured.
Yes. I like that too. Um, you're echoing what I'm also hearing in the industry, that mitigating risk and limiting liability has become language we haven't really heard as much over the past 5 years. So the whole training around what is liability, what does that look like, where are the risks, because that is part of the onboarding training, but really the business language about why is this so important, why do the things matter so much around active supervision, around the turf on the playground, or the surface on the playground and the gates, and all those things aren't simply just a check 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 check, but these are why those are so important when it comes to limiting liability and mitigating risk. I'm hearing that time and again. So
Mhm.
I agree with you on that one. And then also as you said, the let's innovate, because though you're up against competition and making sure that things look fresh, that they're current, all of those are part of what reflect your brand, right down to vacuuming the ceiling every 2 weeks or however frequently that would happen. Um, so as we wrap up here, I'd love, on a personal note, just to know if you have a favorite motto or a quote or something that you live by that helps keep you focused and or kind of your rudder.
God, I have so many. Um, Persistence breaks resistance is one model that I live by. If I want something, I just gotta keep going, and believing that I'm gonna achieve it. So desire, belief, persistence breaks resistance. Um, all my graduating children, I would always give them this message in the graduation, and I would tell them, nothing is impossible. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't achieve what you want to achieve. And always shoot for the stars because you might
Mm.
land on the moon. If you have expectations here, there's no way you're going to get to the expectations here. But if you shoot high and have high expectations, you might get here or surpass that. Um, and another thing that really helped me in my business, another motto is, what doesn't change doesn't change. And what got you here, especially for those companies that, or the businesses that have multiple locations, is what got you here won't get you there. Running one center where your hands are involved in everything, and now you have two or three where you have to be two and three places, you got to learn how to do things completely different. Because if you don't, something's going to give. or
Yes.
you or your business, or you're going to be stagnant and miserable.
I believe that everything that you just said, and to tie it back to what we started out with in the beginning, is that's part of your culture. And it's beautiful because that was part of why your team is still together today and shooting, you shoot for the stars and you might hit the moon, or I'm paraphrasing, but also don't let your previous perceptions of yourself limit where your full potential. So, this has been delightful, Jennifer. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And I'm sure our audience is going to look forward to hearing more from you in the future. So thank you again.
You're very welcome. I'm always here to serve my people, my what I call my peeps in the early childhood education field, which I'm very passionate about.
Well, thank you again. Bye bye.
Bye bye.